Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Beeson and welcome back to my channel. And today, as promised, we are going to be talking about fashion icons of then, ranking them. Last video I did a part 1, that is the icons of now, and I said we would do a part 2 for the then icons, so here we are. If you have not yet seen the part 1, I will link it down in the description below and put it maybe somewhere up here. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So before we actually get into ranking the fashion icons that I have pulled, I want to again just run through my tier listing, and it is going to be slightly different from part 1 because I had to tweak the categories because they were not going to be relevant for the icons of then with what I did for the icons of now, so it's gonna look a little different. So this is my tier ranking system for the icons of then, and the first one is exactly the same as the other video, with the first tier being the icons, the best of the best. They also have the greatest impact in fashion, and they're kind of the ones that we think of as like some of the greatest icons in fashion, and not just in fashion but kind of everywhere. Like these are the people that are iconic and iconic and iconic. So that's pretty simple. And then tier 2 is again going to be next in line, just like the last video, and they are just under the best of the best. They didn't have maybe the same cultural impact, but they had secondary fashion impact and secondary cultural impact that is just as important as the first tier. They're just, to me, I don't think they're on the same level. So again, it's like just the just under tier is what the next in line grouping is. And then tier 3 is going to be the legacy, and it is only for one person that kind of is like the chosen one almost, and will always be remembered, and it goes kind of beyond fashion, but she is a fashion icon. So, and she couldn't be removed from this list. She had to be on the list, so she gets a tier all on her own, and she will be the legacy. And then tier 4 is the tier called It's a Look, and it's for basically very specific moments in time, and there were shifts in fashion and they were part of those shifts, and they're the most memorable from those periods in time. They had impact in fashion. They're not crazy icons to where they're the first names that pop into your head, but they did have influence on a fashion structure, and so they have to be a part of this list. But they're not going to be anything crazy in terms of what people think of, so that's why they're going to be a tier 4 in the It's Look category. And then the last tier is kind of more so a personal tier for me that I felt like needed to be added, and this is for the quote-unquote forgotten, in my opinion. These are the fashion icons that don't get enough recognition, and they're kind of like the originals to the original kind of thing. We'll get into it and it'll make sense, but they're the ones that should be part of the icon group in a more fashion versus kind of pop culture thing, and I just feel like they don't get enough credit and they should be there, so I put them there. So that's what that last grouping is. They're kind of just like the ones that don't get enough recognition and should be getting more icon status than society gives them. So these are my tier rankings, a little different from part 1, but not too different. And just like last time, I just want to disclaimer that I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings or do anything of that nature. These are 100% my opinions, and you can have different ones, and that's totally great. I'm just speaking to what I feel and what I think, and obviously I'm going to have missed people too, so I'm not here to hurt anyone's feelings. So if you disagree, that's fine. If you agree, cool. We're all friends here. So let's get into the rankings. First on this list, because I wasn't going to do her second or third or middle or last, the greatest icon ever, whether it be in fashion, pop culture, American history, I don't really care, it doesn't matter to me, Miss Marilyn Monroe. And we are straight out of the gate going to put her in tier 1 as one of the icons, because you cannot put her anywhere else but at the top. She is one of the women that has produced longevity and the impact that she has had. I mean, she was impactful when she was alive, and then from the moment that she passed and on, she has been a part of so many different parts of history, and she is a huge pop culture piece, and she is huge in fashion. You can look at essentially all of her movies and pick out looks that's like, oh, we know this. It's like we make reference to it. Or there's tons of other people that make reference to it. People go through their Marilyn eras, which is wild. I mean, first and foremost, I think everyone knows the pink "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend" dress from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And that particular moment is what is pulled into modern times. I mean, Madonna, Kylie Jenner did it at some point. Gwen Stefani's had her Marilyn moments. Christina Aguilera's had her Marilyn moments. People dress up like Marilyn Monroe for Halloween. If that doesn't scream icon, I don't know what does. But there's also, you know, her other projects. I mean, the 7-Year Itch, the white dress that she's holding down, we all know it. Or How to Marry a Billionaire, another one that has great fashion moments. Or even maybe not as appreciated or not as spoken to, which would be like The Asphalt Jungle or Niagara. Like, all of her projects, she was meant to be a fashion moment in all of her projects, and it shows from the stuff that she did for her premieres. Premiere looks were always great. The not so extravagant looks that she wore in the movies were still perfect. Or her just casual fashion, we all loved. She was like the epitome of, to me, she's like the epitome of like the American dream and an American icon embracing the idea of fashion. And she's had so many moments, so many looks from award shows, whether it be the Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, the green dress that she who should not be named wore to the Met Gala after party thing, or of course probably one of the most iconic dresses in American history is the Happy Birthday Mr. President nude illusion dress, which was technically the first nude illusion dress. So in fashion, that was huge, because now we see them left and right, but she was the first person to do that, and that particular moment was crazy. And then it was worn and ruined, but we won't talk about that because it's not about her. Marilyn Monroe is like the epitome of icon, and she is probably my biggest icon when it comes to fashion, and so nowhere to put her but tier 1. Very deserving, and I don't think anyone can argue it, so we'll leave it at that. Next is another completely undisputable, in my opinion, but kind of also in everyone's opinion, and I don't think I would take anyone saying that she isn't. Another undisputable icon in the form of Audrey Hepburn. Of course, without even thinking, I'm gonna put her into tier 1 for the icons, because she doesn't belong anywhere else. She just doesn't belong anywhere else. And much like Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn is known for a multitude of different fashion moments in her movies, and the relationship that she had with Givenchy, because that was what probably a lot of her most iconic looks came from that fashion house. I would say specifically those looks came from Funny Face and Sabrina, most of them. I don't remember if there were any other ones, but specifically Funny Face and Sabrina were huge fashion movies alongside, Breakfast at Tiffany's, obviously. But she herself, now we all know that Coco Chanel created the little black dress, but Audrey Hepburn is the one who actually popularized it for the masses. And obviously in today's world, a little cute black dress, having something simple, just black, whatever it is, we are very used to it. But to think that someone like Audrey Hepburn made it a thing into where people started to wear them, and it was a more normal and common thing, is crazy to think about, because she's the one that popularized the little black dress. If you want to just speak to Breakfast at Tiffany's, that's a really good example of it. Or the little black dress, the Givenchy black dress in Sabrina is another good example of it. But she basically gave fashion, popularizing it, didn't create it because that is Coco Chanel, but she popularized something we practice always, basically. So her impact on fashion is actually a literal thing outside of just her being iconic, but her fashion represented kind of like this very minimal kind of elegance that has since been, interpreted and translated into different ways. And in modern times, as we've moved forward, she stands the test of time. And with other projects like My Fair Lady was a huge fashion thing. Roman Holiday is another one. And then Love in the Afternoon is also a huge one. Like, all of her movies, just like Marilyn, have fashion looks. Like, they're not fashion movies, kind of, but they are important fashion moments that are part of fashion history and are a part of, pop culture history as well. And Audrey Hepburn is just as important as, the Marilyns and some of the other girls that we haven't gotten to. But it would make no sense to not acknowledge that Audrey Hepburn is one of the greatest fashion icons of all time. This next woman, we kind of move a little bit more modern, but not really, but kind of, but is the living legend in Cher. Now, for me, I myself don't know a ton about Cher. I don't know much of her music. She's just not someone that I, on her career, know too much about. But on her fashion level, I do know more about it. And she is kind of like one of the biggest risk takers in fashion, because she almost likes to be almost likes to be controversial in some of the things that she wears, even like today as she's older. But for me, I think her as a fashion icon, she still is one, because she still is fully ready to make some risky decisions on what she wants to wear as she's older and everything. But to me, the height of Cher is her beginning, and then going into the 80s and stuff with the Sonny and Cher show specifically, because those looks were amazing, and they were sometimes a little sketchy, especially now. People would consider her dressing like a Native American to maybe be a little offensive, maybe. Or, you know, she's worn like headdresses before, and they're controversial, but that's part of what makes Cher, is being that risk taker that's willing to like take the edge, look over it, and jump anyways. And so for me, I think she is 100% impactful enough to be in the tier 2 section, the next in line. So that is where I'm going to put her, with the abundance of Bob Mackie looks that she's worn, with her, even just her few movies that she's been a part of. I mean, we all remember her, the Oscars look, the black with the headpiece and everything. But to me, the best fashion that Cher ever produced, to me, is from like the 70s, and I guess maybe some of the 60s, but I think it was like more so the 70s, with like the 2 pieces and her long, gorgeous hair and all of the different sorts of shine that she would always wear. Like Cher basically created like that switch and people just naturally being able to take a little bit more risks with their fashion, and I love lots of it. But she was also so pretty. Her hair was so pretty. But I think, you know, with her already having kind of like the confidence to wear Bob Mackie, and Bob Mackie's designs can be crazy, and because she wore them so often, you know, that's Cher is Cher. She's influenced a lot with fashion, and people absolutely love what she brings, even if it's now and she's older. But prime Cher is even more of a fashion icon, and so she's gonna go in tier 2. Next, and I feel like she goes hand in hand with Cher almost a little bit, because they kind of come from the semi-ish same era, I guess, is Diana Ross, but she started in like the 60s. But is Diana Ross. Obviously, she started with the Supremes, and even like the Supremes fashion, they were always coordinated. They would wear like the little matching outfits, and those were great. But when Diana moved to starting to do her own thing, I feel like that's when her fashion just like exploded, because she was just like Cher and fully willing to be super extra with her fashion and pushing kind of the envelope a little bit. And she was another one that wore a ton of Bob Mackie, so there's already that like elevation and like risk taking with wearing his designs. But she kind of like merged the idea of like super extravagant fashion and put it into like diva energy, and then merging everyday wear with like costume wear. And if you just like push all that together, you basically get Diana Ross in a nutshell, with what she wore, from the big flowy hair to the huge like dresses with the big like tulle pieces, the big eyelashes, everything about Diana Ross. Or even like the jumpsuits that she would wear, super sparkle, everything about Diana Ross is extra, and it gives diva, because that is what she is. And she's like the one that is almost like on this little pedestal with like fashion and stuff, because she is so extravagant, and the different types of moments that she's had in fashion are very recognizable, and current icons look up to her as their icon. And obviously, I mean, you know, the first person that pops into my head is RuPaul. Like his biggest icon is Diana Ross, and if you look at like how Diana Ross dressed and then how RuPaul dresses, like you can see it. And when someone who is an icon currently is obviously influenced by someone back then, not that far back, but back then, you have icon status. And so Diana Ross is very much one of those. So next to Cher, I'm gonna put her in tier 2 as the next in line, purely because I don't think, like, Diana's not on, and Cher, they're not on the same level as Marilyn or Audrey, but they 100% are like the next group, right? And so that's why they're gonna be in tier 2, and that's why Diana Ross, with her gorgeous big hair, is going to be in tier 2. The next icon is the first official royal princess on this list, eventual princess, Princess of Monaco, Miss Grace Kelly, and she is right there with Marilyn and Audrey, so I'm putting her in tier 1, the icons, because she was iconic, let me tell you. First and foremost, when you have a bag named after you and inspired by you, I feel like you've done something. But when you have a huge brand like Hermes name a bag after you, the Kelly bag, you are an icon. That is just what it is. And she is the Kelly bag. That's where it comes from. It comes from Grace Kelly, Princess Grace Kelly. And so that's already one thing. But on the fashion level for Grace Kelly, she was the extra, like, feminine, tailored looks with classic and sophisticated styles. Like, she was extremely elegant in everything that she wore, and it was amazing. She is kind of, I feel like she's probably most known for I would say, like, To Catch a Thief and Rear Window is probably what she's mostly known for. So I think those, like, are probably her most recognizable movies. Maybe, I'm not too sure on that. But, like, all of those movies, she had huge fashion moments. I mean, the white dress from To Catch a Thief, or, like, you know, anything basically that she wore in those movies. To me, however, her movie High Society is one of my favorites ever, and every single look that she had in that movie was crazy, and I loved all of it. Something about, like, their era with, like, the 40s, 50s, and, like, the 60s, early 60s, they may not be fashion movies, but they were fashion movies, and everything that Grace Kelly wore was iconic, and it was simple and classic, but it was very her. And then she became a princess, and her wedding gown was so pretty, and it was very much a moment. One of the best royal dresses I've seen, because there are some that I absolutely hate, but hers was absolutely amazing. And just Grace Kelly is one of those women that is like the epitome of classic feminine looks, but throwing in those nice tailored casual type of looks, and she's one of those. So it makes sense for her to be in tier 1. But, you know, the Kelly bag, we all know what the Kelly bag is, and that's her, that's Grace Kelly. So that's a huge thing for not only Hermes as a brand, but for solidifying Grace Kelly as Grace Kelly, basically. The next person on my list is someone that you may not know who she actually is, but you know the name, and this is Jane Birkin. If you hear the name Birkin, I feel like everyone thinks of the Birkin bag. She is the reason the Hermes Birkin bag exists. They created it for her, essentially. one of the most, it's probably the most expensive bag and one of the most like sought out bags ever, all thanks to Jane Birkin. But she is someone that, again, like, you know the name, but you may not necessarily know who she is. She is like one of the pioneers of the boho chic look, which has, you know, lived its life and continued on, and people absolutely love that style. They kind of interpreted differently, but like the boho chic thing has been around for a long time now, and she's like one of the originators essentially of it in like the 60s and 70s. And she's also kind of known for her signature basket handbag that she would like carry around everywhere, and that has since become something that people part of, like, there's like an aesthetic for it, and it's kind of just become something that people do in their fashion. Like, it's become a very big thing. Jane Birkin herself has influenced fashion in a huge way that I don't think people may not know, just because they maybe don't know who Jane Birkin is other than the Birkin bag. And because of that, I'm gonna put her in tier 4 for its look, because it is very much a look. Like the fact that she kind of put together a category of fashion with the boho chic and the basket handbag, and kind of that kind of aesthetic comes from her. It is a very specific look, but she isn't anywhere near like icon. But, you know, again, she's the inspiration for the Birkin bag, so she's got a lot going for her. But she's definitely a tier 4, and I think that's where she should be. In the world of fashion models, more specifically the conversation around supermodels and like who was the first one and yada yada yada, and it's a very like kind of complicated topic to like actually discuss, because there's so many different models that people consider to be the first supermodel. People like to throw out like Lauren Hutton mostly, like most of the time, or someone like Jean Shrimpton is like kind of there. But the problem with those conversations is that they only acknowledge that the supermodel existed like in the 60s. Like, that's like the first time that supermodels ever appeared. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. This next person on my list is credited with actually being the first supermodel, like the first model to be graced the title supermodel. And this person is Lisa Fonssagrives. I don't think I said that right, but that's who she is. She is credited with being the first supermodel ever, and this is back in the 30s. She was like the face of fashion, whether it be in Vogue or Harper's Bazaar. When the idea of a model was different, and it's not what it is today, she was like the biggest name in modeling for the time. She is someone that I don't think people give her enough credit, or like they just don't even know who she is, or it's like the people that are like true fashion people that know their fashion history, they'll know who she is. Of course they'll know who she is, but people don't acknowledge her because they think the first supermodel came in the 60s, when it was technically, you know, 30 years earlier. And so because of that, she is my first in tier 5 as the forgotten, because I do think that she is incredibly important to fashion, because she was like basically the first wave of models in a different type of way as to now, but because runway wasn't really a thing, it was mostly just, you know, photography. And even runway, when it started, it was very different to now. But she was the first wave, and you can't have what we know now without the first, and she was the first. And she deserves more credit because she was absolutely stunning. She had fantastic photos. Her fashion was great. I love her photos. And she was the first supermodel, but people don't know that. And so simply, she is, to me, kind of seemingly a forgotten part of fashion history, and she's not known to the masses, so she's going to be a tier 5. But I absolutely love her. Rounding out my mentions for the 4 photos behind me, we have Liz Taylor, Miss Elizabeth Taylor, and she again is undisputably a tier 1 icon. So I'm going to put her there and get that over with, because that is where she's going to be. And she is, for her time, a very over-the-top fashion individual. You know, I think she was like an early risk taker. Her risk taking was different from like those of like Cher and Diana Ross and people like that, because for her time, risk taking was having a super low cut neckline and showing the girls a little bit, because that was a scandalo, you know, in the 50s, right? But she was kind of known for having her dramatic necklines, fur, feathers. We know her for jewelry. You know, diamonds became kind of part of her image. It's like we were always gonna see some huge diamond necklace or gorgeous earrings, or, you know, her big giant engagement rings, the lot of them, however many there were. Liz Taylor is not only like a fashion icon with something like Cleopatra, right? That's what I think what first comes to mind when you think of her. But she just had like this energy to her that made her fashion all the better, because she carried it well. And she's right there with the rest of like that old Hollywood group, Grace Kelly, Marilyn, where they're all like just as elegant as the next one, and they've all had their fashion moments. It's just like very specific things that make them iconic. And I think particular for Liz Taylor, Cleopatra's probably the biggest thing, but she was always looking to be super dramatic with her fashion and like her party looks or her like award looks, but it's that jewelry. It's the jewelry that we know her for, and that's part of her aesthetic and her image that makes her such an icon. This next individual is the solo tier 3 person for the legacy, and it goes to the People's Princess, obviously Princess Diana. She is someone that is kind of more than a fashion moment. It's kind of like, she's like, what makes her so iconic from just an overarching standpoint is that people to this day absolutely love her and they like completely adore her. And because people loved whatever tense her fashion legacy, outside of just her legacy and what she did as a royal and how she acted more royal than lots of the royals and how caring she was and all that stuff, like her fashion legacy exists because people love her. And she's one of the ones where she kind of had an ever-evolving style. She had very iconic moments. I think people tend to, you know, talk about the revenge dress the most, or like the Travolta dress, or even like, you know, her wedding gown that I don't particularly like, but it's a moment. But she, you know, her style shifted and molded, and it was actually pretty natural to me, in my opinion. It was pretty natural to kind of how a normal person works with their fashion, to where it's like you start here and then you just kind of go like this with your fashion, and you may start really bad and then you kind of figure it out, and it's ever evolving and it's ever changing. And I think Princess Di is a good example of real life, and that's why people loved her and love her, because people will forever love her. But she is still someone that people kind of dress like. I mean, you know, people feel like people started wearing, you know, oversized t-shirts or sweatshirts with biker shorts and some sneakers because of her, like, you know. And it's kind of like she is just an embodiment of a legacy that will live on and will be cherished, and her fashion is just a part of it, because she is iconic for her fashion, but she's iconic for a lot of different things as well. But this is an icons list of, you know, the then women, because I don't have any men on this list actually, and she had to be here, but she's not in the category of anyone else. She's kind of by herself, and so that's why putting her in her own at a tier 3 kind of made sense to me. And so Princess Diana, you know, lives on, and she is the legacy in my list, and she's the legacy kind of everywhere. So in terms of fashion, this First Lady is probably the greatest of all time. I think we know where I'm going with this. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, whether you call her Jackie Kennedy or Jackie O, it is the same person. And Jackie Kennedy, I refer to her as Jackie Kennedy. I always have, and I don't think I'm ever going to change that. But Jackie Kennedy was completely a moment and has changed a lot for fashion, particularly, obviously, because that's what we talk about on this channel. She, first, we're putting her in tier 1 because she's not going to be a tier 2. And she's not going to be anywhere else lower than that. So we're putting her in tier 1, the icons, because she has to be there. But, you know, I think the most memorable thing that people kind of think about with Jackie Kennedy is obviously the pillbox hats, or like the very boxy Chanel suits, the big buttons, the color palettes, right? Obviously her hair and her pearls. You know, we think of her as a very simple but incredibly chic First Lady, and Jackie Kennedy's influence kind of spreads a little bit because her fashion shifted how women wear fashion, right? And then specifically to me, from what I see, she fully influenced how the royals and the following First Ladies dressed. And you can see it. You know, I mean, just who we're talking about, Princess Diana had worn looks that you can see the direct connection to Jackie Kennedy. And Princess Kate, I've seen her wear things that look like Jackie Kennedy. And I've seen, you know, the next royal, Meghan Markle or whatever her name is, she has worn things that you can tell look like Jackie Kennedy. She didn't do it good, but she did it, so that's the influence. Being the First Ladies, regardless of whether or not you like any of them, it doesn't matter. Like Hillary Clinton has worn things that's very Jackie-esque. My personal favorite on the fashion level, and again, regardless of whether or not you like the politics, Melania Trump is probably as of the, you know, post-Jackie First Ladies that has actually given Jackie Kennedy energy, and I loved it. Again, it doesn't matter, it has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do, I'm talking fashion and fashion only. Melania Trump's First Lady outfits and how she dressed and how she was as First Lady very much gave Jackie Kennedy. And so Jackie Kennedy influenced this greater spectrum of the royals and First Ladies after her. And that's huge because not only like is it, you know, those leading women in whether it be American history with First Ladies or the Brits or any other royalty people, I don't know any of the monarchs anywhere, but that's a huge thing. But even just down to her fashion, people started to dress like Jackie Kennedy, and she popularized like those little pillbox hats. Are so cute. They're so cute with her like big hair and everything. But you know, those boxy Chanel suits became so popular. I mean, even in today's world, we are seeing fashion designers, most notably Moschino, did a Jackie Kennedy runway. All of the looks were they were Jackie, pillbox, boxy suits, everything. So like, you know, she was the First Lady in the 60s, and then she, you know, she lived on until she passed, but she 100% still influences fashion today, and I don't think that's ever gonna change, because having those simple and very chic looks, regardless of what it is, she's part of that journey for people to have that in their wardrobe. And so she is a huge fashion inspiration to so many people. And she did it well because she looked so good. I love Jackie Kennedy. I love her. I did projects on her in school. I just loved her fashion. Everything about her was amazing. But you know, she is one of the icons in fashion, so that's why she's in tier 1. And I don't think anyone can really argue it. So we're gonna move on. When you think about women kind of dipping into more menswear like things, you know, like pants, there should probably be 2 names that pop into your head, I would assume, maybe. The first person is Katharine Hepburn, and she is kind of like the menswear for women shift. She's like one of 2. There's 2 people. We'll get to the other one in like a second. But like menswear was like not a thing for women. Like women were not wearing pants in the 30s. That was not a thing. It's like they were kind of not allowed to. It just wasn't part of women's fashion. Or even just like more tailored and casual fashion wasn't really for women. You know, in the 30s, women had to be super glamour and wearing super pretty dresses. Like the aesthetic of what women were wearing in the 30s was very different. And even like in the 40s, like the 40s is where it shifted, but like, you know. And Katharine Hepburn is one of those shifters in women being kind of, I'm not gonna say allowed to wear pants, but like she kind of shifted the mentality that, oh, women can wear pants and not just dresses and skirts. But she comes from like a different line of glamour compared to the rest of her old Hollywood 30s and 40s fellow actresses, because she defined that more casual but glamorous type of fashion. You know, she defined like the American look almost, and that became super important because once the war started, she was like the epitome of fashion, because fashion moved to Hollywood instead of being in Paris because there was a war going on. And so that was like that big shift for Katharine Hepburn to have a lot of influence in women being able to wear casual stuff, not always needing to wear, you know, those dresses or skirts or whatever it may be. It was because of her. And something too with Katharine Hepburn, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, is that she was heavily involved in the design process for everything she wore, whether it be whether it be off screen or on screen, she had a part in it. So everything that she has worn in all of her movies, everything, she's part of it. So she is like actually involved in the fashion that she helped kind of progress, and giving her the kind of tip of the hat to menswear is huge, because where would women be? How long would it take for women to be able to wear pants if like she and someone else didn't do it first? So they were pushing the envelope in women's wear in the 30s, and that carried on in the 40s, 50s, so on to now. So we owe a lot to Katharine Hepburn, and because of her influence, I'm gonna put her in tier 2, next in line, because I don't think, she doesn't have the same type of fashion like these 4, but she is extremely influential, but they don't think of Katharine Hepburn first, I don't think, and so that's why I'm gonna put her in tier 2. I think if she was naturally bigger, she'd probably be a tier 1, but because she isn't, she's gonna be in a tier 2 because she influenced so much. But she is still such an icon. These Hepburns, they really do know how to do fashion, and they know how to do it differently. They're not related, but you know. Hepburns. Both iconic, but Katharine Hepburn is extremely important to women's fashion today. So when it comes to women's wear evolving with having men's wear implemented into it, you know, I was talking about Katharine Hepburn and someone else, and that someone else is Marlene Dietrich, who, to me at least, seemed to have been just slightly ahead of Katharine Hepburn, because she, just like Katharine, brought menswear to women, but Marlene was the very first woman to wear a pantsuit in a movie, and that movie was Morocco from 1930, and that moment was super big and super important for women's wear, specifically with just having that first figure of, oh, a woman is wearing a pantsuit, and then it slowly but surely pushes that type of fashion into women's wear. But she basically introduced a different level of glamour into Hollywood because she challenged those gender norms, and she pushed it a little bit more than Katharine Hepburn, but they are basically one and the same when it comes to being those spearheads. Because, you know, with Marlene's, like, one day she'll wear the most glamorous gown with furs and everything, and then the next day she's, you know, wearing a suit, and it's very casual and all that. And I think, you know, Marlene, along with Katharine, because it was the 30s where this started, this was a huge movement that we would slowly start to see, kind of more so in like the 40s, and then of course once we kind of hit the 50s, we were definitely seeing it more and more. But it was important for Marlene Dietrich to be that fashion icon and to push the envelope and not be scared to do it, and actually be very comfortable to do it, and do it in a way that was super glamorous, that still fit Hollywood. And she was extremely fearless and kind of didn't care, but that was like part of who she was as a person. And so just like Katharine, right next to her, she's going to be a tier 2 next in line, kind of for the same reason that I don't think Marlene Dietrich is as big as the tier 1 women, even though she is just as impactful, just like Katharine is just as impactful. Because I think if they were like a little bit bigger, and I think if she was like a little bit bigger and people thought of her more, she would 100% be in a tier 1, but she's like right there. So she has to go in tier 2, but her and Katharine Hepburn were pivotal to the progression of women's fashion becoming more casual, more tailored. We don't have to wear a dress or a skirt every single day to be socially accepted. So that was really important. And I mean, Marlene Dietrich is an icon anyways, so I know in today's world, when we think of like the original supermodels and like the original supermodel group, our mind immediately goes to like Naomi Campbell and Cindy Crawford and Chrissy Turlington and Claudia Schiffer and like all of them. But, you know, they have to come from somewhere. And with, you know, the supermodel, the original supermodel, Lisa, that I had mentioned earlier, with her, there was actually an original supermodel group, and that consisted of Lisa, and then Jean Patchett, and then Dorian Leigh, and then Dovima, and then lastly is Suzy Parker. These 5 women are the actual original supermodel group that no one talks about. And I think that the only people that maybe really know that they exist or acknowledge them are the ones that are true fashion people and understand fashion history. Because if you understood fashion history, you would see these 5 women everywhere, because they were the fashion model. They basically gave fashion model jobs. So they were the first, and they were everywhere. They were in Vogue, they were in Harper's, they were doing campaigns when beauty campaigns started to pop up. They were, you know, part of movies and stuff like that. They were basically, for the time, the supermodel group of the 90s. and that's huge, but people don't recognize them as such, and it's wild to me. So just like with Lisa, they're gonna go right into tier 5 as like the forgotten, because I really do think that people don't know that they existed, or they just think that they're just some model from like the 50s. But these women defined fashion in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, early 60s, from a modeling, actual true fashion industry perspective. Not an actress or a singer perspective, but an actual model fashion perspective. And they were huge. I mean, Jean Patchett was like everywhere. It's like almost every single time I see old photos, it's like she's like every other photo kind of thing. And then Dovima was also massive. She was, I believe, actually in Funny Face with Audrey Hepburn. She had like a small role in it, if I remember correctly, which I think I do. And Suzy Parker was probably like also one of the biggest fashion models that was like on a first name basis with the entire world. Stunning redhead, and she was also basically everywhere. And Dorian Leigh, who's actually Suzy Parker's sister, was also very, very big. But the kicker with Dorian Leigh, and I'm not sure if anyone actually knows this, is the Funny Face movie with Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn's character was actually based off of Dorian Leigh. So if that says anything to you, all 5 of these supermodels, the original supermodels, I absolutely love, and I would love for people to maybe like learn more about them and appreciate them a little bit more and know about them, because as much as I love like the 90s supermodel group and all that stuff, they were not first, they were second basically in terms of like an actual super group, and people need to know that. So Jean Patchett, Dorian Leigh, Suzy Parker, and Dovima, they're gonna be right there in tier 5 with Miss Lisa, the first supermodel. And last, but certainly not least, is the one and only Madonna. And I feel like she's also like, I feel like most people on this list are pretty self-explanatory that they're fashion icons, but you know, Madonna, just like Diana Ross and Cher, were very important for music fashion, particularly because all 3 of them are, you know, singers, but they were all risk takers. And Madonna was a very special kind of risk taker, because to me, she was always looking for controversy, because it almost seemed like she wanted to piss people off with the things that she was wearing and the music she was doing. She was ready to like shift the status quo almost, and she wasn't afraid to offend people, I think, which is obviously kind of part of fashion and part of fashion culture, to kind of twist gears and stuff. But Madonna is kind of unique because she evolutionized how costuming and performing kind of came together, because you can see post her, like the way that singers and artists do costuming for tours and performances shifted very much so. I mean, we all know the iconic cone bra look, and that's like the best example of it. But she kind of was part of what changed the perspective of people when it came to fashion and music. I feel like there was more of a continuity once she kind of pulled them in a little bit more and kind of gave them a little bit more symmetry. Not saying that there wasn't anything beforehand, but it was different. You know, you can even see the difference between like Cher and Madonna, and they're like the same level, but it is a little different. But Madonna has had tons of different looks. I mean, she had her own Marilyn Monroe moment with Material Girl, I think is what that was. So there's an obvious icon to icon connection. And her style has always been, to me, it's always been like grunge and then whatever decade she's in. So it's like she started out grunge, but it would make it 80s, and then grunge and then make it 90s, and then, you know, grunge and then make it early 2000s. Like she's that's like her aesthetic seemingly. Whether you like her or not, that's what you see. And she fully takes risks. So just like Cher and Diana, she is a tier 2 next in line for the same reason that she is very iconic, but she's just not, to me, because this is my opinion, she is just not as iconic as tier 1, regardless of whether I like her and her music or not. But I can acknowledge, you know, the fashion from the fashion perspective, right? And so she should be in tier 2 because she has been someone that people dressed up like. She has been someone that has recorded fashion changes and influenced different things and is always pushing the button on different stuff. Even now as she's getting older, like she's still doing Madonna, just older, basically. So, you know, she had to be on this list because I think I'd be crazy if I didn't put her on this list. And with that, this is my final ranking for fashion icons of then. And I personally, I do love the then icons more than I do now, just because I am a huge history and specifically fashion history person, so I absolutely adore this stuff. And I love like old Hollywood and all of the fashion and aesthetics that come from that. So I had a lot of fun pulling pictures and stuff for this video, a little bit more than I did the first video. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on my list, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Again, these are my opinions, but I would love to just kind of see what everyone else thinks. If you, obviously I'm sure you probably knew most everyone on this list, or if you didn't know about some people, I would love to know. And again, this is the part 2, so I will link the part 1 down in the description. I'll also stick it up here if you would like to watch that. And I think that's it. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!